जब आँखों में अरमान लिया, मंजिल को अपना ठान लिया, फिर मुश्किल क्या और आसान क्या, बस ठान लिया तो ठान लिया। सो हेलो एंड वेलकम टू माय चैनल दैट इज द एनसीईआरटी ऑडियो बुक। सो आज का जो हमारा चैप्टर है वो न्यूरल कंट्रोल एंड कोऑर्डिनेशन का है। इससे पहले सबसे पहले मैंने आपसे स्टार्टिंग में कुछ लाइन बताई थी, वो एक मोटिवेशन थी हमारे नीट एग्जाम के लिए, हमारे ड्रीम डॉक्टर बनने के लिए। तो हम आज का हम अपना चैप्टर स्टार्ट करते हैं। As you know, the function of organs/organ system in our body must be coordinated to maintain homeostasis. Coordination is the process through which two or more organs interact and complement the function of one another. For example, when we do physical exercise, the energy demand is increased for maintaining an increased muscular activity. The supply of oxygen is also increased. The increased supply of oxygen necessitates an increase in the rate of respiration, heartbeat, and increased blood flow via blood vessels. When physical exercise is stopped, the activities of nerves, lungs, heart, and kidneys gradually return to their normal condition. Thus, the function of muscle, lungs, heart, blood vessel, kidney, and other organs are coordinated while performing physical exercises in our body. The neural system and the endocrine system jointly coordinate the integrate all the activities of the organs so that they function in a synchronized fashion. The neural system provides an organized network of a point to point connection for quick coordination. The endocrine system provides chemical integration through hormones. In this chapter, you will learn about the neural system of human mechanism of neural coordination like transmission of nerve impulse conduction across the synapse and the psychology of reflex action. So the first topic is 21.1, that is neural system. The neural system of all animals is composed of highly specialized cells called neurons, which can detect, receive, and transmit different kinds of stimuli. The neural organization is very simple in our lower vertebrates. For example, in Hydra, it is composed of a network of neurons. The neural system is better organized in insects, while a brain is present along with a number of ganglia and neural tissues. The vertebrates have more developed neural system. So the next topic is human neural system. The human neural system is divided into two parts. First one is central neural system, that is CNS, and the second one is peripheral nervous system, that is PNS. The CNS includes the brain and the spinal cord and is the site of information processing and control. The PNS comprises of all the nerves of the body associated with the CNS, that is brain and spinal cord. The nerve fiber of the PNS are of two types: afferent fiber and efferent fiber. The afferent nerve fibers transmit impulse from tissues/organs to the CNS, and the afferent fibers transmit regularity impulses from the CNS to the concerned peripheral tissues/organ. The PNS is divided into two divisions called somatic neural system and autonomic neural system. The somatic neural system relays impulses from the CNS to skeletal muscles, while the autonomic neural system transmits impulses from the CNS to the involuntary organs and smooth muscles of the body. The autonomic neural system is further classified into sympathetic neural system and the parasympathetic neural system. Visual nervous system is the part of peripheral nervous system that comprises the whole complex of nerves, fibers, ganglia, and plexus by which impulse travels from the central nervous system to the viscera and from the viscera to the central nervous system. So the next part is 21.3, that is neuron as a structure and functional unit of neural system. A neuron is a microscopic structure composed of three major parts, namely cell body, dendrites, and axon, that is given in figure 21.1. The cell body contains cytoplasm with typical shell organelles and certain granular bodies called Nissen's granules, short fibers which branch repeatedly and project out of the shell body, also contain nichal granules and are called dendrites. These fibers transmit impulse towards the cell. The axon is a long fiber, the distal end of which is branched. Each branch terminates as a bulb-like structure called synaptic knob, which possesses synaptic vesicles containing chemical called neurotransmitters. The axon transmits nerve impulses away from the cell body to synapse to or to neuromuscular junction. Based on the number of axon and dendrites, the neurons are divided into three parts. That is multipolar, that is with one axon and two or more dendrites, found in the cerebral cortex. Next one is bipolar, that is with one axon and one dendrite, found in the retina of eye. And the last one is unipolar, that is cell body with one axon only, found usually in the embryonic stage. There are two types of axon, namely myelinated and non-myelinated. The myelinated nerve fibers are enveloped with Schwann cells which form a myelin sheet around the axon. The gaps between two adjacent myelin sheets are called the knots of Ranvier. Myelinated nerve fibers are found in spinal and cranial nerve. Unmyelinated nerve fiber is enclosed by Schwann cells that does not form a myelin sheet around the axon and is commonly found in the autonomous and somatic neural systems. 21.3.1, that is generation and conduction of nerve impulse. Neurons are excitable cells because their membranes are in polarized state. Do you know why the membranes of a neuron is polarized? Different type of ion channels are present on the neural membrane. These ion channels are selectively permeable to the different ions. When a neuron is not conducting an impulse, that is resting, the axonal membrane is comparatively more permeable to a potassium ion, that is K plus, and nearly impermeable to sodium ions, that is Na plus. Similarly, the membrane is impermeable to negatively charged proteins present in the exoplasm. Consequently, the exoplasm inside the axon contains high concentration of K plus and negatively charged proteins and low concentration of Na plus. In contrast, the fluid outside the axon contains a lower concentration of K plus, a high concentration of Na plus, and thus form a concentration gradient. These ionic gradients across the resting membrane are maintained by an active transport of ions by sodium potassium pump, which transport 3 Na plus outwards for the 2 K plus into the cell. As a result, the outer surface of the axonal membrane possesses a positive charge while its inner surface becomes negatively charged and therefore is polarized. The electrical potential difference across the resting plasma membrane is called as the resting potential. You might be curious to know about the mechanism of generation of nerve impulses and its conduction along axon. When a stimulus is applied at the site that is given in figure 21.2, that is point A, on the polarized membrane, the membrane at the site A becomes freely permeable to Na+. This leads to a rapid influx of Na+, followed by the reversal of the polarity at that side. That is, the outer surface of membrane becomes negatively charged and the inner side becomes positively charged. The polarity of the membrane at the site A is thus reversed and hence depolarized. The electrical potential difference across the plasma at the site A is called the action potential, which is in fact termed as a nerve impulse. At sites A immediately ahead, the axon, that is site B, membrane has a positive charge on the outer surface and a negative charge on its inner surface. As a result, a current flows on the inner surface from site A to site B. On the outer surface, current flows from site B to site A. To complete the circuit of the current flow, hence the polarity at the site is reversed and the action potential is generated at the site B. Thus, the impulse, that is action potential generated at the site A, arrives at the site B. The sequence is repeated along the length of the axon and consequently the impulse is conducted. The rise in the stimulus induced permeability to Na plus is extremely short lived. It is quickly followed by a rise in permeability to K plus within a fraction of a second. K plus diffuses outside the membrane and restores the resting potential of the membrane at the site of excitation, and the fibers become once more responsive to further stimulation. Next point is 21.3.2, that is transmission of impulses. A nerve impulse is transmitted from one neuron to another through junction called synapses. A synapse is formed by the membranes of a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron, which may or may not be separated by a gap called synaptic cleft. There are two types of synapses, namely electrical synapses and chemical synapses. At electrical synapses, the membrane of pre and post synaptic neurons are in very close proximity. Electrical current can flow directly from one neuron to the other across these synapses. Transmission of an impulse across electrical synapses is very similar to impulse conduction along a single axon. Impulse transmission across an electrical synapse is always faster than the across chemical synapse. Electrical synapses are rare in our system. At a chemical synapse, the membranes of pre and postsynaptic neurons are separated by a fluid-filled space called synaptic cleft. Do you know how the presynaptic neuron transmits an impulse that is at action potential across the synaptic cleft to the postsynaptic neuron? Chemicals called neurotransmitters are involved in the transmission of impulses at these synapses. The axon terminals contain vesicles filled with these neurotransmitters. When an impulse that is action potential arrives at the axon terminal, it stimulates the movement of the synaptic vesicles towards the membrane where they fuse with the plasma membrane and release their neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft. The released neurotransmitter bind to the specific receptors present on the postsynaptic membrane. This binding opens ion channels, allowing the entry of ions, which can generate a new potential in the postsynaptic neuron. The new potential developed may be either excitatory or inhibitory. So the next point is 21.14, that is central neural system. The brain is the central information processing organ of our body and act as the command and control system. It contains the voluntary movements, balance of the body, functioning of a vital involuntary organ that is lungs, hearts, kidneys, etc. Thermoregulation, hunger and thirst, circadian 24-hour rhythms of our body, activities of several endocrine glands, and human behavior. It is also the site of for processing of vision, hearing, speech, memory, intelligence, emotions, and thoughts. The human brain is well protected by the skull. Inside the skull, the brain is covered by a cranial meninges consisting of an outer layer called dura mater and a very thin middle layer called arachnoid and inner layer which is in contact with the brain tissue called pyometer. The brain can be divided into three major parts, that is forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. That is given in this diagram that's showing cytical section of the human brain. So the first part of the brain is forebrain. That is, the forebrain consists of cerebrum, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Cerebrum forms the major part of the human brain. A deep cleft divides the cerebrum longitudinally into two halves, which are termed as the left and right cerebellar hemisphere. The hemispheres are connected by a tract of nerve fibers called corpus callosum. The layer of the cells which covers the cerebral hemisphere is called cerebral cortex and is thrown into prominent folds. The cerebral cortex is referred to as a gray matter due to its grayish appearance. The neuron cell bodies are concentrated here, giving the color. The cerebral cortex contains motor areas, sensory areas, and a large region that are neither clearly sensory nor motor in function. These regions, called as the association areas, are responsible for the complex functions like intersensory association, memory, and communications. Fiber of this tract are covered with a myelin sheet, which constitute the inner part of the cerebral hemisphere. These give an opaque white appearance to the layer, and hence it is called white matter. The cerebrum wraps around a structure called thalamus, which is the major coordinating center of the sensory and motor sing- signalizing. Another very important part of the brain is hypothalamus. Lies at the base of the thalamus. The hypothalamus contains a number of centers which control body temperature, urge of eating, drinking. It also contains several group of neurosecretory cells which secrete hormones called hypothalamic hormones. The inner parts of cerebral hemisphere and a group of associated deep structures like amygdala, hippocampus, etc. form a complex structure called the limbic lobe and limbic system. Along with the hypothalamus, it is involved in the regulation of sexual behavior, expression of emotional reaction, that is excitement, pleasure, rage, and fear, and the motivation. Second one part is midbrain. The midbrain is located between the thalamus slash hypothalamus of the forebrain and bones of the hindbrain. A canal called cerebral adequate passes through the midbrain. The dorsal portion of the midbrain consists mainly four round swelling lobes called corpora quadrigemina. And so the last part is hindbrain. The hindbrain comprises pons, cerebellum, and medulla, also called a medulla oblongata. Pons constitute of a fiber tract that interconnected different regions of the brain. Cerebellum has a convoluted surface in order to provide the additional space for many more neurons. The medulla of the brain is connected to the spinal cord. The medulla contains centers which control respiration, cardiovascular reflexes, and gastric secretions. Three major reasons make the brain stem: midbrain pons and medulla oblongata. Brain stem forms the connection between the brain and the spinal cord. So the next topic is 21.55, that is reflex action and reflex arc. You must have experienced a sudden withdrawal of a body part which comes in contact with objects that are extremely hot, cold, pointed, or animals that are scary or poisonous. The entire process of a response to a peripheral nervous stimulation that occurs involuntary, that is without conscious efforts or thought, and require the involvement of a part of the central nervous system, is called a reflex action. The reflex pathway comprises at least one afferent neuron, that is receptor, and the one efferent, that is effector or exciter neuron, appropriately arranged in a series that is given in 21.5 figure. The apparent neuron receives signal from the sensory organ and transmit the impulse via a dorsal nerve route into a CNS at the level of a spinal cord. The efferent neuron then carries signal from the CNS to the effector. The stimulus and response thus forms a reflex arc as shown below in the knee-jerk reflex. You should carefully study figure 21.5 to understand the mechanism of the knee-jerk reflex. And here is a diagrammatic representation of reflex action. So knee-jerk reflex is given. So read carefully. And the next topic is 21.6, that is sensory reception and processing. Have you ever thought, how do you feel the climatic changes in the environment? How do you see an object and its color? How do you hear a sound? The sensory organs detect all types of changes in the environment and send appropriate signals to the CNS, where all the inputs are processed and analyzed. The signals are then sent to the different parts slash center of the brains. This is how you can sense changes in the environment. Sense organs. We smell things by nose, taste by tongue, hear by ear, and see objects by eyes. The nose contains mucus coated receptors which are specialized for the receiving the sense of smell and called olfactory receptors. These are made up of olfactory epithelium that consists of three kinds of cells. The neurons of the olfactory epithelium extend from the outside environment directly into a pair of a broad bean sized organelles called olfactory bulb, which are extension of our brain's limbic system. Both nose and tongue detect dissolved chemicals. These the chemical senses of gustation, that is taste, and olfactory, that is smell, are functionally similar and interrelated. The tongue detects taste through taste buds containing gesticular receptors. With each taste of a food or sip of a drink, the brain integrates the differential input from taste buds and a complex flavor is perceived. In the following sections, you will introduce the structure and the function of eyes, that is sensory organ for vision, and the ear, sensory organ for the hearing. So the next topic is eye. 21.6.1, that is eye. Our paired eyes are located in the socket of the skull called orbits. A brief account of structure and functions of human eye is given in the following section. Parts of an eye. The adult eyeball is nearly a spherical structure. The wall of the eyeball is composed of three layers, that is given in figure 21.6. The external layer is composed of a dense connective tissue and is called the sclera. The interior portion of this layer is called the cornea, and the middle layer is choroid, contains many blood vessels and looks bluish in color. The choroid layer is thin over the posterior two-thirds of the eyeball, but it becomes thick in the anterior part to form the ciliary body. The ciliary body itself continues forward to form a pigmented and opaque structure called the iris, which is the visible colored portion of the eye. The eyeball contains a transparent crystalline lenses which is held in the place by ligaments attached to the ciliary body. In front of the lenses, the aperture surrounded by the iris is called the pupil. The diameter of the pupil is regulated by the muscle fibers of the iris. The inner layer is the retina and it contains three layers of neural cells. From inside to outside, ganglion cells, bipolar cells, and the photoreceptor cells. There are two types of photoreceptor cells, namely rod and cones. These cells contains the light-sensitive proteins called the photopigmented. The daylight, that is photopic vision, and the color vision are the function of cones, and the twin TV light, that is scotopic. vision is the function of rods. The rods contain a purplish red protein called the rhodospin or visual purple, which contains a derivative of vitamin A. In the human eye, there are three types of cones which possess their own characteristics photopigments that respond to red, green, and blue lights. The sensation of different colors are produced by the various combination of these cones and their photopigments. When these cones are stimulated equally, a sensation of a white light is produced. Ne- The optic nerves leave the eye and the retinal blood vessels enter it at a point medial to the slightly above the posterior pole of the eyeball. Photoreceptor cells are not present in that region and hence it is called a blind spot. At the posterior pole of the eye, lateral to the blind spot, there is a yellowish pigmented spot called macula lutea with a central pit called the fovea. The fovea is a thin out portion of the retina which only the cones are densely packed. It is the point where the visual acuity, that is resolution, is greatest. The space between the cornea and the lenses is called the aqueous chamber and contains a thin watery fluid called aqueous humor. The space between the lens and the retina is called the vitreous chamber and is filled with the transparent gel called vitreous humor. Mechanism of the vision. The light ray is visible wavelength focuses on the retina through the cornea and lens generate potential that is impulses in rods and cones. As mentioned earlier, the photosensitive compounds, that is photopigments, in the human eye is composed of opsin, a protein, and the retinal, that is an aldehyde of vitamin A. Light induces dissociation of the retinal from opsin, resulting in the changes in the structure of the opsin. This causes membrane permeability changes. As a result, potential differences are generated in the photoreceptor cells. This produces a signal that generates action potential in the ganglion cells through the bipolar cells. These actions potential impulses are transmitted by the optic nerve to the visual cortex area of the brain where the neural impulses are analyzed and the image formed on the retina is recognized based on the earlier memory and the experience. And the last one is the ear. The ear performs two sensory functions, hearing and maintenance of the body balance. Anatomically, the ear can be divided into three major sections called the outer ear, the middle, and the inner ear, that is given in 21.7. The outer ear consists of the pinna and external auditory meatus, that is canal. The pinna collects the vibrations in the air which produce sound. The external auditory meatus leads inwards and extends up to the tympanic membrane, that is eardrum. There are a fine hairs and wax secreting glands in the skin of pinna and the meatus. The tympanic membrane is composed of connective tissues covered with the skin outside with the mucous membrane inside. The middle ear consists three ossicles called malleus, incus, and stapes, which are attached to one another in a chain-like fashion. The malleus is attached to the tympanic membrane, and the stapes is attached to the oval window of a cochlea. The ear ossicles increase the efficiency of transmission of sound waves to the inner ear, and Eustachian tube connects the middle ear cavity with the pharynx. The Eustachian tube helps in equalizing the pressure of the on either sides of the eardrum. The fluid-filled inner ear called labyrinth consists of two parts, the bony and the membranous labyrinth. The bony labyrinth is a series of the channels. Inside these channels lies the membranous labyrinth, which is surrounded by a fluid filled called perilymph. The membranous labyrinth is filled with fluid called endolymph. The coiled portion of the labyrinth is called cochlea. The membranous constituting cochlea and the resiners and the bacillars divide the surroundings perilymph filled with bony labyrinth into the upper scala vestibuli and the lower scala tympani, that is given in figure 21.8. The space within cochlea called scala media is filled with the endolymph. At the base of the cochlea, the scala vestibuli ends at the oval window, while the scala tympani terminates at the round window which opens to the middle ear. And a diagrammatic representation of a sectional view of cochlea is given. So see it carefully. And the next is the organ of Corti is a structure located on the basilar membrane which contains hair cells that act as a auditory receptor. The hair cells are present in the rows on the internal side of the organ of the Corti. The basal end of the hair cells is in close contact with the afferent nerve fibers. A large number of processes called stereocilia are projected from the apical part of each hair cells. Above the row of the hair cells is a thin elastic membrane called tectorial membrane. The inner ear also contains a complex system called vestibular apparatus located above the cochlea. The vestibular apparatus is composed of three circular canals, and the otolith, that is macula, is the sensory part of the scule and utricle. Each semicircular canal lies in the different plane at the right angles to each other. The membranous canals are suspended in the perineum of the body canals. The base of canals is swollen and is called ampulla, which contains a projecting ridge called crista ampullaris, which has hair cells. The scule and utricle contains a projecting ridge called macula. The cisterna and macula are the specific receptor of the vestibular apparatus responsible for the maintenance of the balance of the body and posture. And the last one is mechanism of hearing. How does ear convert sound waves into neural impulses, which are sensed and processed by the brain, enabling us to recognize a sound? The external ear receives sound waves and directs them to the eardrum. The eardrum vibrates in response to the sound wave, and these vibrations are transmitted through a ear ossicles, that is malleus, incus, and stapes to the oval window. The vibrations are passed through the oval window on the fluid of the cochlea, where they generate waves in the limbs. The waves in the limbs induce a ripple in the basilar membrane. These movements of the basilar membrane bends the hair cells, pressing them against the tectorial membrane. As a result, nerve impulses are generated in the associated afferent neurons. These impulses are transmitted by the afferent fibers via auditory nerves to the auditory cortex of the brain, where the impulses are analyzed and the sound is recognized. So the chapter is ended. Thank you for watching this video, and please like, share and subscribe my channel, and please share your feedback in the comment section. And once again, thank you for watching this video.